a question we got maybe once or twice before, but I don't know if we went deep into it, or maybe there's a little bit more we can go into it. I think I asked you a few questions, which is questions about file management, session organization, folder structure, backups, all that kind of stuff. Maybe we can go from you use hard drive backups. You don't yet use a cloud.
Yeah, I have 3 hard drives going at a time.
Yeah,
I have actually probably 4. I have my internal work drive, a Time Machine backup, and then 2 archival backups for everything else. So 4 hard drives going all at one time, I guess, and they're pretty much always plugged in and always working.
I used to have one main drive with 2 backups that I'd have like a daily backup, and then I would say a week, but it's probably more like once a month I'd go to a 3rd deep backup. I have since switched over to Backblaze, a cloud backup service that a number of people I know use. And I have not had to recover anything from it yet, so I don't know how great that is, but I've heard...
It's probably worth testing.
Yeah, I've heard from a number of professionals that it's great. So I have both my main hard drive and then a sort of deep backup archive, which is, a few terabytes of old sessions and things that are on a drive, but also backed up into the cloud. And that basically does it, I don't know, literally in real time, but every few minutes it's backing up. So I no longer have an array of physical hard drive backups.
Yeah, someone probably knows better than me, but those kind of things sometimes mess up Pro Tools. Like if you have Dropbox running in the background, for example, and it's constantly updating, Pro Tools hates that.
Yeah, I've heard that about Dropbox as well. Backblaze, I've not had any of those problems with.
Cool.
Dave Rosen, my buddy, who does film composition, was in this band, The Parlor Mob, that I produced back in the day. A good friend of mine, he uses it. I think Kian Reardon, works with St. Vincent, used to work with Eric, and so much other stuff he uses as well, and a few other people mentioned it. So hopefully that answers.
I might check that out.
But I think you and I both agree, backing up is super fucking important.
Mm-hmm.
Back your shit up.
Backing up is important, and labeling things neatly so you know how to get back. I always have an example of when you're doing, maybe you're at version 11 of a mix, and because production's changing, arrangements changing, like a lot of stuff's changing throughout the process. This could be over 2 years, it could be over 2 weeks. If someone, you're at mix 11 and the artist goes, man, everything sounds perfect right now, but the bass in mix 2 just sounded sick. Something about the bass in mix 2. I want to be able to get back to mix 2 while they're on the line with me, like really fast, just for that bass to import session data. So having a mark of when the latest bounces are saved to a session is the most important. I think last week I went over my way and kind of the Tony Maserati camp way of labeling. Figure out your own way of labeling, whatever makes sense to you, that a bounce has a corresponding session title. So you can get back to that.
Say your method again, because it was,
we have, well, I don't want to take credit for the method. It's Tony Maserati's method. But it's your initial, then dot, and then a number for the day, then an incremental number after another dot. So maybe 1.7, and maybe put a note next to it. And I usually put like vocals. Maybe that's when I started the vocals. So I like the instrumental now, and I'm starting on the vocal. And then you would do dot and then another number, which is the bounce number, like the version, however you label your bounces. V3, we do improg. So whatever it is, that number, the 3rd number corresponds to the bounce that goes to the client.
Yeah.
So when the client says, I like the bass from mix 2, but the vocals and everything else from mix 11, I can get back to mix 2 bass. So there's always a last number that tells me what that bounce was on what day. And I would do the same thing when I was producing, and I would have a rough mix. It would say J.1.4.R1, rough 1, R1. Because then 1 would be the improg and the version, but there's an R before it, so that meant rough for me. So when we were sending out versions, we weren't getting confused whether it was a rough or this is a final, like we're moving into final mixing. Because as you do, when I was producing a lot, I would mix my own production. So I had to know, are we in rough mode or am I supposed to deliver a mix?
It seems like an important thing, which I actually don't do. I do lots of versions, and maybe I'll talk about that in a second. But when I'm naming things, I don't do a end of day or every time I bounce. Like I don't have a system for that. I generally am as soon as I bounce something, the next time I open it up, I do a save as. But I think.
But how would you know what to get back, which one to get back to on what
exactly?
day?
Yeah, I mean,
you're going to guess in the email when you sent it to yourself to listen to in the car. It's just like too much guesswork.
Yeah, I think I think I've never met anyone who's too organized.
Yeah, no such thing.
I think every producer, every mixer, especially writers and producers, have some sort of, like, you walk into somebody's room and it looks like a disaster, but they know where everything is. That's a really nice idea, and it probably works for most people, including me. I'm sort of talking to myself on this because that's how a lot of my shit works. But it turns out the more you can get in practice of good organization, the easier your workflow is going to be. The easier you're going to be able to recall things, like backing up, labeling. When I'm producing stuff, when I'm writing stuff, it's usually just I open a session and it's got a date on it. As soon as we have a song title, I do a save as with a title. As soon as there's a drum loop, I do a save as with like quick production or just like first prod or something. Like, I'll just do names of everything as we're writing it. So there's all kinds of versions. So if 3 hours in, the singer's like, I like that drum beat you did first. What happened to that? I go, fuck. And then you can get back to it. So I think naming and naming and naming and naming, you can't, they're small files. You're
also,
that
stuff translates to real life, right? Just going back a second, I'm the opposite of what you described. It's like, well, it's a mess up in here, but I know where everything is. Yeah. If I put the wine opener in the wrong drawer, I'm never going to find that wine opener. Like, I just don't understand it. So I think it's actually worth pointing out to oneself what type you are. Yeah. And saying, do I need to be super neat and tidy? Whether that's in my home, my car, and my sessions, my computer, that's like digital landscape. That's like the digital hygiene and all this, like cleaning up that space where you create, whether that's analog or digital. It's my computer. It's where everything is. And that's neat. Like, if the desktop gets too full, it's usually two things on there, just hard drives, right? Like right now there's some screenshots because I took some screenshots for a friend had a baby, and I was like, oh, I want that, like, to have, and he sent me a photo. And then there's screenshots of random shit from mix buses that I didn't have the settings of or whatever. It could be anything that has to be cleaned up to another file folder at some point. Like, they're just too messy. So if you're, how
messy mine is right now.
But I think either way works, right? There's no right and wrong. So if someone's listening and hearing us talk about tidiness, there's a difference between tidiness and organization. You can be, but I would say that most people would probably thrive more with organization of some sort and some sort of tidiness.
I think everybody benefits from it. Like I said, I've met many people who are not organized enough, and I think I've literally never met a record maker of any type that's too organized. Yeah, just never once. Never. I was like, that's a little unnecessary. So given that everybody is either,
and if they do, they're projecting onto you their insecurity about how they're not.
Right. My assessment of it has never been that I've met anybody that's too organized. Let's see if there's anything else in there. It was session organization, file management, naming.
Can't emphasize that stuff more. There's not much more to say on it, but I can't emphasize the importance of it anymore.
It's super important.
That's what makes you reliable and professional and people coming back to you. Because the minute you lose stems as a mixer and you lose a session, you can't get back to a mix. They're like, why are we working with this guy? Like, there's no forgiving on that stuff.